Hello everyone, it's Cookie Lou in Arizona. I just want to take a moment to say that I'm very honored that so many of you have asked me more information about the book that I wrote, Family of Pearls. Some of you are interested in obtaining the book and reading it, and I thank you for that. I do want to say that the book is still really in revision. I'm trying to clean up some of the typos and grammatical errors that it still has. I did try many times to make this book perfect, but I'm new at writing. I really don't know what I'm doing. It was all trial and error, a 6-year project, and I could not afford professional editing from the publishing company. It was just ridiculous. They wanted so much money, so I tried my best to do it myself. And after many tries, I just kind of gave up and just shelved the book and said, well, I just can't seem to do it, because when you're an author and you're writing, a story, your brain knows what you've written, and it often fools your eye in putting in words that aren't there, that should be there. So as you're reading it, you know already what you've written, so you kind of skim over the flaws and the mistakes. And I tried a couple of times to revise it, and I am still in the process of another revision to try to clean it up. But when I submitted it to Barnes & Noble several years ago, I just did it on a fluke, and a bold fluke at that, to see what they would think of it. And I was surprised after several months getting a call from the manager of Barnes & Noble in Surprise, who was running the community event, telling me that she did like the book, that she read it, 3 employees read it, and they all selected this as the memoir, biographical memoir. They got over 50 submissions of various venues of writing, poetry books and mystery novels and cookbooks and children's books, and they only could pick 10, and they wanted mine for the memoir. I was very honored, and I told her about the flaws, and and she said, it doesn't matter. She says, you're not professional. None of you are professional writers. We're just trying to show the community what local writers can do. And she says, your story was amazing. She says, it was the only book that I actually read cover to cover, and it's worthy of being at our showcase. So she says, don't be upset if you don't sell a whole lot of books, because oftentimes many people only sell a couple of copies at the most, and some sell none. It's just a matter of introducing the authors to the community and having the books on display, and not to worry about it. So anyway, the day of the event, I was very surprised. I sold about 8 or 9 copies, and she told me that I had the highest book sales out of all 10 books. I was surprised about that. And it was such an honor to know that my book was actually going through the register of Barnes & Noble. And I did receive a little check from them. It was nominal amount, because they made most of the money on the sales. But needless to say, it was a fun day for me. So knowing that it's still an imperfect, but amazing story, if you'd still like to get the book, I'd be happy to, I have some copies here of the latest revision. I would be happy to, sell it to you for my cost plus the mailing charges and send it to you. Just let me know what your personal email is, so for privacy, and then we can communicate and I'll get your address. Or if you do want to order it, you can go to Barnes & Noble and just say that I want to buy this book, Family of Pearls, and they will issue an order to the publishing company, but it will take a long time to get it, because they will only print per order. And some people have told me that I waited like almost 2 months for the book and whatever. But I do have some copies here if you'd like. I'd be happy to send it to you. So anyway, I'm going to take a moment to read a little bit of the book to you, to give you an idea of what my writing is like and what the story kind of is about. Chapter 3 is titled Maria and Sebastiano, which are my grandparents, and this is their passport picture when they arrived on the Woodrow Wilson to America in 1920. And this is a little story about my grandfather. I remember talking about figs. I was eating figs in one of my last videos, and I remember mentioning that my grandpa had a fig tree, and a couple of people liked that little story, and they wanted to know more about that story. So this talks a little bit about my grandpa and his fig tree. So forgive me, I'm not the best reader. I'll do my best for you. But anyway, here's a little segment of Family of Pearls. I recall the day my grandfather walked around the yard smelling everything that grew there and taking a taste of this and that. I could tell that it made him feel good to watch things grow. I can still see him as he roamed around the garden, wearing his tan suit and fedora hat with a black band. He kept a sprig of sweet basil tucked behind one ear because he enjoyed its aroma. Every now and then he'd pull off a leaf, toss it in his mouth, and chew on it as he walked around the yard, cursing at the goddamn birds that were eating his figs. "Stop, bastardo, you ruined my Fiji! Goddamn son of a bitch," he mumbled as I played near him in the yard. I watched him stroll around his fig tree, tending to its needs, snapping off the unnecessary things that lingered on its branches. He loved that tree. It had been with him for a long time. It was part of him, like a finger or a toe. The fig tree was an immigrant too, and had gone through many changes in this new country, just as he had. As the story was told to me, that precious fig was an offspring of a tree that grew in the yard of his home in Sicily. He had cut off a few small branches from that tree, rooted them, packed them in rich Sicilian soil, and wrapped them tight in a canvas sack. He nurtured the branches throughout the voyage to America, and he hid them rolled in his coat when he went to Ellis Island. It was a miracle that those little branches survived. He swatted his hand at a bird as it tried to stick its beak into a ripe fig. "Get out of here, get the hell out of here," he demanded. "Latro, thief, I'm going to shoot you." I giggled at his annoyance in broken English. Both my grandparents had a tendency to speak in a rhythm of half Italian and half English. I wish they had spoken to me in their language more when I was a child, so I could have learned to speak it fluently. Instead, I just got a drift of what they were saying when they spoke, understanding only a word here and there. My grandparents spoke Siciliano. Although it is still Italian, Siciliano has a long range of history tweaked into it. It's spoken and spelled a bit differently and considered to be less refined compared to other dialects spoken within the boot of Italy. My mother told me that when they were children, she and her siblings went for Italian lessons taught by a local woman in the back room of a store. Her parents wanted them to learn to speak proper high-class Italian. They went for a while, but only her sister Celia had the ear to pick up the refined dialect. Nonetheless, the only words I heard in the house growing up were the words of Sicily. My grandfather pulled some figs from the tree. "Your grandmama is going to love this fig for the lunch," he said, swatting at another bird. As my thoughts, for some reason, focused on wondering how my grandparents happened to meet each other in Sicily, I asked my grandfather, Where did you find Grandma to marry her?" He stopped for a moment, his eyes squinting from the sun as he looked up across the yard. I watched his thoughts go back to that time before he answered me. "I find her in the baker's shop by the church," he said, "when I go to buy the bread." "What was Grandma doing in the bake shop?" I asked. "She was making the bread," he said. "Then what happened, Grandpa?" He began to tell me the story in a way that a child could easily understand. My telling the story of their courtship is based on my memories of that day in the garden and the compilation of stories from my relatives' recollection of it. I remember the day was warm in the sun-bathed yard. The sun put a chill on my skin that I always felt when its warmth relaxed me into a coziness that gave me a toasty shiver. As he began to tell me his story, a voice interrupted him from the back of the house. It was my grandmother. She was standing at the back door holding a yellow bowl in her arms. Raising her hand over her brow to shade her eyes from the sun, she called out to my grandfather, "Sebastiano, vieni a mangiare," come to eat. The warm breeze of the day made its passage under the brim of his hat. He took a moment to set it more firmly onto his head. Un momento, he said. 1 minute. He pulled a few more figs from the tree as he watched her walk over to pick some tomatoes. The lacy shadows from the trees danced around her, bouncing beams of sunlight on and off her face. The look of her still aroused him. Possessed by her image, his thoughts drifted back further as he daydreamed of the first time he had seen her in the sunlight of Sicily, and he began remembering his Maria. She was sitting under an olive tree, wiping the back of her neck with a wet cloth, and taking a break from the heat of the baking ovens. Sebastiano noticed how beautiful she was, with the sunlight on her skin moist with perspiration. From that moment he felt his heart reach out for her as he walked over to introduce himself. She was barely 18, shy, and not particularly interested in talking with him. But he learned that her name was Maria, and he told her that he would like to buy some bread. Maria thought Sebastiano was a nice-looking man, polite and respectful in his manner, but she had no interest beyond selling him the bread. He went to the bakery often, sometimes buying only a few small rolls, just so he could continue conversing with her. Sebastiano was a simple man of modest means. He knew that all he could offer Maria was his heart, loyalty, and the hope of a more prosperous future someday. He began to notice that Maria had other suitors seeking her attention. They tipped their hats with cordial greetings, talked pleasantries, and complimented her pretty green eyes to encourage her to smile and take notice of them. Realizing he had competition, Sebastiano knew that he had to make a stronger effort. So after using a bit more persistent but charming persuasion, he received permission from Maria and her mother to come courting. The large stones were exposed through the wide cracks and broken sections in the concrete exterior of the houses, which stood wall to wall along the hillsides of Sicily. Their roofs, shingled with baked clay tiles, were glazed an orange-brown color, and the old wooden shutters that bookended the windows were in need of care, and showed traces of faded paint on their slats, a reminder that they had once been painted deep shades of blue, red, or green. The poverty that ravaged the island of Sicily could not remove the beauty of the wild flowers that salted the mountains, or the pine trees that stood tall above the spiny cactus, flowered with white blossoms. The prickly pear still fruited, as did the fig and olive trees. The ivy still clung to the exterior walls of houses throughout the province of Messina, and placements of terracotta pots exhibited a wide variety of flowers and plants. Lacy ferns, margarita daisies, roses, and orange poppies dominated the doorways and balconies. Multicolored geraniums accented the stairways, as did the succulents and the butterfly orchids. The trumpet vines and bougainvillea twisted through the trellises and wooden arbors in the courtyards, exploding flowers in brilliant colors from lavender to fuchsia red, and cobblestone streets still meandered around the small town of Santa Stefano di Camastra, the place of my grandparents' birth. Nearby stood the Sanctuary del Lato Santo, an ancient temple and meeting place for believers throughout Italy who came in pilgrimage to the Mount. The sanctuary, which housed a large wooden crucifix worshipped for centuries, watched over the valley of citrus groves and orchards of grapevines and almond trees. Dated palms and tall cypresses stood betwixt farmhouses nestled in the hills, while the roads and dusty pathways curled and spiraled their way down to the brown-colored sand that edged the royal blue sea, floating clusters of small boats, and massive mounds of white rock tufted with shrubs and nesting birds. The beauty of Sicily had set the stage for romancing Maria, as Sebastiano strolled with her to the seashore, talking of his ambitions and picking her wild flowers along the way. Okay, well, that's just a little bit of my memoir about my grandparents' courtship, and their relationship had its highs and lows, but it lasted for 52 years and produced 8 loving children. And I love my family very much, and I expose a lot of wounds in this book, and I healed a lot of wounds in in writing the book. It was very therapeutic for me, as I mentioned before, and I'm very honored that I accomplished this. It's written for family, um, um, to honor our history and legacy, and to keep all the people that came before us alive in the hearts and minds of the family that continues on. So, thank you for showing an interest in my book, and I hope you enjoyed the story, and thank you very much. Bye. Thank you for listening.